Hello everyone, my name is Tom, and today I want to share a story about something that confused me for a very long time, something that made me question my entire way of learning English. Because even though I was studying harder than ever before, I still couldn't speak naturally. For years, I truly believed that effort was everything, that if I just spent more time with textbooks, memorized more vocabulary, and understood grammar rules more deeply, I would eventually become fluent. So I built a very strict routine for myself. I studied every day without fail. I reviewed lessons multiple times. I wrote down new words. I practiced grammar exercises carefully. And I tried to understand every small detail. And honestly, I felt proud of that discipline because I thought I was doing everything right. I thought I was on the correct path. But despite all that effort, there was still a problem that I could not ignore. When it came to speaking, I was still slow, still hesitant, and still unsure. And that gap between what I knew and what I could actually do started to frustrate me deeply. And I began asking myself a simple but important question. If I am working so hard, why am I not improving in real communication? The answer didn't come immediately, but it slowly revealed itself when I started paying close attention to what was happening inside my mind during conversations, every time I tried to speak English. I noticed that my brain was extremely busy, almost like it was overloaded. First, I would think of an idea in my native language. Then I would try to translate that idea into English word by word. After that, I would check the grammar rules in my head, making sure the tense was correct, the sentence structure was accurate, and the vocabulary was appropriate. Sometimes I would even stop in the middle of a sentence to correct myself because I was afraid of making mistakes. And by the time I finished all these steps, the conversation had already moved on. And I felt disconnected and left behind, and this made speaking feel stressful, slow, and unnatural, almost like solving a math problem instead of communicating with another human being. However, something completely different happened when I listened to English podcasts, and this difference became the key to everything, because when I listened, there were moments when I could understand entire sentences instantly. Without translating, without analyzing grammar, the meaning just appeared in my mind naturally and effortlessly. And at first, I didn't understand why that was happening, because logically, I thought speaking and listening should use the same knowledge, but clearly they didn't feel the same. So I started observing more carefully, and gradually, I realized something very important about how the brain works. My brain was actually using two completely different systems for language processing. The first system was slow, analytical, and focused on rules. This system broke language into small pieces and tried to build meaning step by step. And this was the system that had been trained by textbooks, grammar exercises, and traditional studying methods. It was useful for understanding structure and correctness, but it required time and conscious effort. And the second system was fast, automatic, and based on patterns. This system didn't analyze language piece by piece. Instead, it recognized familiar sounds, phrases, and sentence patterns that it had heard many times before. And this system worked almost instantly, without conscious thinking. And I realized that this second system was being trained when I listened to real English, especially through podcasts where language was used naturally and continuously, and that's when everything became clear. I had spent most of my time strengthening the analytical system, but I had almost ignored the automatic system, and that was the reason why I could understand grammar but couldn't speak fluently, because real communication depends heavily on automatic processing, not slow analysis. In real life, conversations move quickly, People don't wait for you to think about grammar rules. They expect immediate responses. And if your brain relies only on analysis, you will always feel slow and under pressure. And once I understood this, I knew I had to change my approach. I didn't completely stop using textbooks because they still gave me a foundation, but I significantly reduced the time I spent on them, and instead, I focused much more on listening to real English input, especially podcasts. I started listening every day. Even when I didn't fully understand, I listened while walking, eating, and resting. And at first, it felt very uncomfortable because I was not used to not understanding everything. I felt like I was losing control, like I was not learning properly, but I decided to trust the process. And over time, something incredible started to happen. My brain began to adapt. I started recognizing common phrases without needing to translate them. I could predict what the speaker was going to say next based on patterns. I became familiar with the rhythm, tone, and flow of natural English. And most importantly, I slowly stopped translating everything in my head. Instead of thinking in two languages, my brain began processing English directly, and this shift was very important because it reduced the mental effort required to understand and respond. And as a result, speaking started to feel lighter and more natural. I no longer needed to build every sentence from zero. I could use chunks and patterns that my brain had already stored from listening. And this made my responses faster and smoother, even if they were not always perfect. And I also noticed that I became more confident because I was no longer afraid of making small mistakes. My focus shifted from being correct to being understood. And that change in mindset made communication much more enjoyable. After some time, I realized that my biggest mistake was not a lack of effort, but a misunderstanding of how language learning actually works in the brain. I had been trying to control every word, every sentence, and every mistake, and that made communication slow, stressful, and unnatural. But once I shifted my focus from analyzing language to experiencing it through listening and real exposure, everything began to change. I became faster, more confident, and more natural when speaking. And that's when I finally understood a simple but powerful truth. Fluency is not about how much you know or how perfect your grammar is. It's about how quickly and naturally your brain can respond in real situations. And to develop that ability, you need to train the automatic system in your brain through repetition, exposure, and real input, not just through textbooks. Because in the end, language is not something you solve like a problem. It is something you experience, absorb, and live with every single day. And once you understand that, learning English becomes not only more effective, but also much more enjoyable.